You know who we are.
This is Fred and John Talks.
So, Fred, I'm going to talk today about Gen X.
I'm really looking forward to this one. Interesting topic.
It is. You and I had a brainstorm weeks ago about doing boomers to zoomers.
Right.
Because you're a
boomer
and I'm a boomer. The two of us are two boomers.
And we thought, it would be kind of fun to go through the generations, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. Gen Z is the Zoomers because they started in 2000 as the millennials.
But we're going to start talking about some of the characteristics of the X generation, Gen X.
Yes, I'm looking forward to you educating me because I'm not familiar with it, and I know you've done.
I hope you're going to ask me questions.
Well, I will, and I know you've done your research.
One of the pieces of research I did on Gen X.
Remember, folks, that Gen X is 1965 to 1980. Those 15 years or so, maybe even 85. So 15 to 20 years, 1965 to 1980 to 1985. What I've done in research shows me that these people who were born at that era of time with their parents progressing on in life towards 2000, the year 2000, they're supposed to be resourceful.
Okay.
Why the heck would they be more resourceful than people like us?
In previous generations.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think that means that boomers were not resourceful, but in your research, what can you unpack that a little?
It was just a list of characteristics that are supposed to be typical of Gen Xers.
Okay. So we just have to take the word for it. In other words, they didn't spell out why.
No, but it's linked to several of the other characteristics they talk about.
Okay.
The next one is that they're independent and adaptable. So what I kind of wonder around that, independent and adaptable, and they supposedly grew up with traditional values of their parents, but they were also introduced to early technology because computers came in the mid to late 60s.
Yeah.
So computers were being introduced, and initially they were for education purposes and used by administrations and governments and state governments, local governments.
Yep.
And only later did they go into education and personal computers. So what I'm kind of wondering, Fred, is the Gen Xers, they grew up with parents of more traditional values because their parents would have been 1940s, 50s, 60s before they had the Gen X.
Yes.
So their parents were in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s before they had their children. So those parents of the Gen Xers would have been more traditional values, churchgoers, etc. And they probably didn't have the same kind of work-life balance that the Gen Xers apparently looked backwards and thought, gee, my parents worked a lot. I don't think I need to do that much work, or I want to have a different work-life balance.
All right. May I ask, in your opinion, how does that compare with the boomers? Because they were very traditional too. They worked hard. A lot of blue-collar workers and
my parents were like that. My parents were both school teachers, and they worked night and day. My father had a second job, and I guess even though I'm not a Gen X, if I look back on the way my parents lived their life before me, they were very
much like that.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Very straight arrow.
And that is why I asked.
Church going. In
fact, we went to church from the time I was born.
Some of the
I think my mother left the hospital and went to church with me.
Straight to church.
Yeah, right.
That's why you've been so good over the years.
Oh yeah, right. Oh yeah, I've been good, all right. Yeah. Good for nothing.
Some of the other characteristics that I looked up about Gen Xers is that they like to be self-employed and entrepreneurs. They were kind of the first generation of personal computers. But just imagine how expansive that would make their life.
That explains a lot, doesn't it?
The computer took them around the world. They didn't have to travel.
That's right. Then they didn't have to go ask. As I've told you, my father was a professional librarian way before the internet, when you needed people who were skilled in the library to direct you toward the research you were doing. But with the advent of personal computers, you could...
Explosion.
Oh, yeah.
Just think of some other things that happened to those Gen Xers. The birth control pill came in 1965, 64, 65. That was a radical change to behavior.
Radical. Yes.
It was a very big deal.
Yes, it was.
Think about, I think it was February 11, 1964, at the Washington Coliseum, the Beatles performed live.
Oh.
And 2 days before that, on February 9, Ed Sullivan.
I was sitting as far away from the TV as you are. I was sitting there cross-legged watching as a kid.
It was exciting. Elvis was earlier.
He was.
But by the 60s into the 80s, Elvis was relatively old news.
He was, yeah. He had fallen out of favor and into some bad habits.
But, the birth rate in 2024 apparently had fallen to its lowest rate of fertility for women, like
last year?
Yeah, last year, 1.6 babies per fertile woman. And compared to the 1960s and the 1970s, that's the fertile rates.
That's real low.
Yeah, they peaked out, and then they started going down after the birth control pill. That's the link. The link was, the lowering of the birth rate.
They're belting out far less babies on birth control.
That's right. It was bad for business, because I was an OBGYN doctor, and I really like women having babies. Other things, Fred, that happened in the 60s that I think could have impacted Gen X, would it make them more adaptable or realize that life is pretty fickle, is that JFK was shot in the 1960s. He was shot in 1963.
And RFK.
RFK.
And Martin Luther King. And the list goes on.
Martin Luther King, 1968. So I just wonder how those things affected the Gen Xers. What's interesting from my viewpoint is that I was living in Australia then. Whenever MLK was shot in 1968, I was already in Sydney in Australia.
Okay.
Then you have kind of the leftover effects of religious crusades, like Billy Graham. He was very prominent in the 50s and the 60s, but he still was on crusades in the 60s and the early 70s.
For several decades.
Yep. So I think that may have had a profound effect on some Gen Xers.
Yes.
And the first moon landing, what about that? 1969.
When you think about how many things were happening, and boy, the historians must have had a feast day just talking about the late 1960s, because everything you're saying, and then not to forget, Woodstock and Kent State, 4 college students being killed, because they're protesting. I mean, what an upheaval.
Political activism and dissent about the Vietnam War.
Vietnam War, yes, one of my favorite war movies is Born on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
True story.
So one of the things we're going to do is interview somebody that was part of Gen X. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to interview somebody of Gen Y and Gen Z, so that we'll have some input from Boomer through to Zoomers.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And the next session that we do on Gen X, I think we have a woman who we're going to interview and talk to who's agreed to.
She's already agreed.
Yes, she's going to give us her viewpoints about what she thinks was going on in that era of time, or how she was impacted by it. I want to mention a couple of other things that I came across, Fred, that impacts what I think is important to just raising children. And we're really talking about children, that they're the generations. So here's a C.S. Lewis quote that I think I want to finish with. C.S. Lewis wrote, "Children are not a distraction from more important work. They are the most important work. In the end, the legacy that matters won't be what you built in this world. It will be who you raised and whether they felt safe, seen, and loved in your presence." Isn't that beautiful?
When I was married and my 3 kids were young, they did a terrible, we built the house, but they did a terrible job on the yard and had all these patches and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My wife said, "Fred, don't worry about it. We're raising men, not grass."
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know what else, Fred?
Yeah.
I've always thought for a long time that raising my daughters, just like you're raising your sons and daughter, that is the most important product of any generation.
Yes.
Is the children. It doesn't matter whether they're X, Y, Z.
Doesn't matter.
We've
what
got to take
generation.
care of the children and raise
Yes.
them right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, John, for doing all that research and for how articulate you are about it and how sensitive.
Thank you.